Good afternoon and good morning. My name is Greg Shove, and I'm the founder and executive chairman of SocialChorus, and I'm joined today by Cheryl Lewis from ROI Communication. Welcome to our webinar, Manager Communication in a Digital World. Our plan is to spend the next 30 to 40 minutes going through this presentation together. Cheryl's going to be the star of the show, and I'm going to be sort of I'm the Charlie Rose of this conversation, but Cheryl's the expert, and she's going to walk us through most of this content. I'll chime in where appropriate, and then we'll obviously take questions along the way and at the end. And as I said, we'd like to wrap up by around 11:40 Pacific time or 2:40 on the East Coast. So welcome all. Hello, Cheryl.
Hi, Greg. Hi, everybody. It is a pleasure to be with you all today discussing a topic that's near and dear to my heart, manager communication. I've been with ROI Communication, a consulting firm that specializes in employee communication and engagement for over 15 years. And over those years, I've been privileged to work with many of our clients on different challenges, such as reinventing the internal communication function, providing strategic advice, helping to communicate major changes such as new strategies, initiatives, acquisitions, divestitures, moves, leaders, and so on. And one of the most important channels, which is often neglected in these changes, is how to best equip leaders and managers to communicate effectively with their teams, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, and I'll just remind everybody to join us. We use the ReadyTalk chat window if you have a question. As I said, we'll take it either during the presentation, we'll make this interactive, or we'll take some questions at the end. And if we don't have time for every question, we'll get back to you one-on-one with answers. And as Cheryl said, our plan today is to talk about manager communications, what the research says, what ROI's research says, why it's important, how it's been important historically, and how it's going to be important going forward, and the key steps to effective manager communication and the role that technology will play. We'll review some case studies and best practices, and then we'll take your questions. So that's our agenda, and we're going to get started. So Cheryl, let's start with some of the data, and I know you guys at ROI do a lot of research, I think pretty much annually, around employee communications, internal communications, effectiveness, and what the enterprise is doing and how they could improve. Why don't you walk us through some of the data from your most recent research?
Great, and I'm also going to share some data from others as well. So I just want to start first about engagement, because ultimately that is what manager communication is driving towards, is engaged employees. And when we talk about engagement, what are we talking about? So the Corporate Leadership Council defines it as an individual's commitment to something or someone in their organization, and how hard they work and how long they stay as a result of that commitment. And an engaged person is committed both rationally and emotionally to their day-to-day work, team, direct manager, and organization. And this commitment results in many positive things for organizations. So as you can see on this chart here, and this is data that Gallup has collected that shows engagement has a substantial effect on KPIs in organizations. And this first chart just looks at companies that are in the top quartile versus the bottom quartile perform so much better on important things like profitability and customer perception, and even things like safety incidents, quality issues, absenteeism, the negative things we try to avoid, are significantly better within companies with high engagement. We also see it linked to improved revenue growth, as well as even earnings per share. Stock prices perform better in companies with highly engaged workforces.
Yeah, and I think we'd all agree, Cheryl, but I think one of the challenges has always been connecting it, right? Connecting internal communications to that company performance. So I know we'll probably talk, this is a conversation we have at SocialChorus and in our webinars really throughout the year around how do we get better as communicators connecting what we do to those outcomes, right? Because it's not always easy.
That's correct. And so we have some data actually to substantiate that. Data that ROI has collected, as well as information on this next slide from Gallup and Harris Watson, where we see that a vast majority of engagement is driven by managers. So managers account for 70% of the variance. that we see. If you go to the next slide, Greg has referred to the research that we do, which is called the ROI Communication Benchmark, and it's a study we do of 115 large companies. We just completed it for 2017, and out of that, we found that there are 4 key drivers that actually are things that we control in communication that drives increased financial performance. So we found a predictive power and a high correlation between manager communication effectiveness, trust and engagement, and I would argue that a vast majority of trust and engagement is driven by the relationship with the manager, measurement practices, and communication messages and message quality. So we find that this is really the most important thing an organization can do with communication. Budget, focus, attention is really focusing on manager communication. Yeah.
So in your point of view, Cheryl, they're the hub. So in the 15, and I know you ran internal communications at a large organization before joining ROI, but in the 15 years you've been at ROI, your perspective has been, I guess, and is now that they're the hub. The manager is the key for effective employee communications. That's
right, because if you go to an organization and you talk to employees, which I've just done in the last few weeks, and you ask them, what's your relationship like with your manager versus your manager's manager, your manager's manager's manager, always people love their manager, feel a relationship, trust their manager. And if that person doesn't have the information the company wants to share with employees, they are just missing out. But ironically, even it's so important, we have found in our study that only 50% of the companies we surveyed gave favorable scores to manager communication effectiveness within their organization, which is only up 1% from 2 years previously.
That is terrible. That is a terrible score, isn't it?
It is a terrible score, or it's a huge opportunity. That's how.
Okay, all right.
I think we have to look at it.
That's a better way to look at it. Yeah, sure. Okay.
That's right. Right. So however much you're doing now, there's tremendous opportunity to improve the way you're doing it. And we know that managers are the best way to reach and engage employees. There was a study just done by Gartner looking at 12 possible communication channels, including a lot of digital ones, and they also found direct managers are the most effective way to reach employees. When we talk about,
I assume we're referring to, do you think this has got more of a deskless employee sort of feel to it, or is it all meaning, knowledge workers, so to speak, that sit at a desk versus, which by the way, of course, is the vast majority of the U.S. workforce is outside of the office, they're deskless in some way. Do you think that these stats are sort of apply to all scenarios and all sort of employees?
Yes. In fact, I've been talking to both people in offices and people working remotely in different ways, and it really doesn't matter. That person is the touch point. That's the person who provides direction. That's the person who provides feedback. That's the person who gives you performance reviews. So, if you look at these are how you would define manager communication effectiveness on the slide, that's why it's absolutely so key that it be done well.
So if 50% aren't doing it as well as they could, is that because they don't know too? Like is this the sort of the fault of the manager, meaning the manager not realizing how important they are in this role as a communicator, or is the fact that they know it but they have not been enabled by sort of their boss headquarters or sort of the company or both? Like what's your sense of that, Cheryl?
I think there are a lot of reasons for it. One is that companies don't necessarily think of the managers as being key. So they may think that, we can just send out information. Oftentimes managers don't even get the information before the employees because it's just easy to send it to everybody. And then everyone looks to their manager, and the manager has no more information than anyone else. So that's kind of a process issue. Some of it are skill issues. People get promoted to be managers, and they're not told, really, this is what's expected of you. This is what it looks like in this organization. This is how to do it well. And I think, it's like breathing. I think a lot of companies feel like, well, they'll figure it out. They'll do it, and the information's there. But for something that is such a critical factor, there's an opportunity to customize, systematize it, and really turn it into a competency in an organization rather than something dependent on random individuals who you happen to hire and have developed. So,
sure. Makes sense. So your point of view is obviously it's an untapped opportunity, right? There's significant upside here for companies.
Absolutely.
And let's move on then. So that, I think, sort of setting the scene for why we need to do this, meaning put managers at the center of an employee communications program and enable those managers. So let's move on then, Cheryl. All the experience at ROI working with, really, I think you work with sort of every household, every one of your customers is a household brand name in almost every industry probably. So let's talk about what you guys have distilled down to the 5 key steps to effective manager communication. If you could walk us through these.
Absolutely, Greg. So the 5 key ones are to first assess what's going on in your company. And the reason to do that is that it's not a one-size-fits-all, like there's only one way to do this. Every company is different, as Greg was alluding to before. Some companies will have mostly desk work, or some might be in a manufacturing environment. Some people have people in the middle of the ocean on oil rigs. There are different work environments. You have people who may be very new within an organization. You may also have a highly tenured group of people. So what is needed in an organization really differs and is a reflection of the culture of that organization. So figuring out what will work and then documenting and communicating clear expectations for managers in terms of the frequency, the content, the flavor of it, but really being clear so people understand what does success look like in this area, and then helping them be successful with training, support, apps, tools, content, and making sure it's kept fresh so it's not a one-shot deal, but it's something that just becomes part of the fabric of the organization. And then you need to measure this regularly to ensure that managers are doing it the right way, and you get that information from the employees who are being communicated to, and this provides feedback to managers so they can continue to improve and you can continue to improve the system, and obviously tying it ultimately to accountability around performance reviews, rewards, and recognition.
Let's spend a little bit more time here, Cheryl, and sort of talk about realities, right? I was thinking one of your comments around getting the information to the managers, sometimes they get at the same time as employees. Well, sometimes they get it later than employees because it's already been made public, for example, right? I mean, in the age in which we live, right, inside information almost becomes outside information at the same time, right? And that employees might read about something, in their favorite blog or in BuzzFeed or something. So, like, just what are the how would you accommodate for that, or how would you compensate for that inside a large organization in terms of how do you advise your clients in terms of making sure that manager is in fact hearing about this stuff in a timely fashion?
Well, to really have it be part of your plan, so as you're communicating anything to employees and externally, to your point as well, is to think about the manager community as a separate audience that needs the information preferably before those other audiences with more information and context to provide. So I think it's not thinking of them as just part of the employee community, but as a separate group that has unique requirements. And some organizations do that very well.
Yeah. And then let's talk about the changing nature of the workforce and the fact that as a manager, you might be managing a team that are full-time, part-time contractors. Even in the Bay Area where we're from, right? We see that increasingly. I run into Google managers. I bump into Google managers in my neighborhood that are managing not just full-time employees but contractors and part-timers on the same team, even, right? And or workers across generational. Generations, I guess, in terms of, age and kind of work habit, work style, technology style, if you will. Any thoughts on so again, the reality of that, right? That you're not dealing with one type of employee in one setting,
Right.
but really kind of a mosaic, right? As a team leader or division president or plant manager or whatever it might be, you might be really dealing with this kind of real mix of employee types.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. But what it all boils down to, regardless of the type, is people are people, and people want a relationship with their manager. They want to trust that person. They want to feel like they're accessible when needed, that they'll be listened to as needed. And so there may be many different ways of creating that relationship, but I think the basics don't really change, and I think that, the tools have to adapt given the realities of working globally, remotely, with contract teams. So, having just spoken to a lot of employees in the last week, many of the people I spoke to did have managers that were remote, but they said, my manager is on IM all the time, always accessible. Whenever I need them, they're there. We email each other or send messages to each other in various different forms. We have a standing one-on-one. We have a weekly team meeting. So there are things you can count on that are regular, and then on an as-needed basis, being very connected and available. So.
Yep, no, I agree. And then I'm actually seeing a comment here from Bill from our audience. He makes the point that to really implement this, you've got to treat managers differently, and that you probably need to get legal, financial, executive buy-in, right, and to be a sort of conscious buy-in, is Bill's point, around a distinct management communications program, right? So they are truly enabled and feel like they can, carry that message or carry that information to their team leaders, or team members rather. So could you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, essentially that's what you're proposing, I think, right? Is that there needs to be a distinct management communications program?
Absolutely. That's correct. And the key to this really is employees want to understand how their work makes a difference. So how does it affect customers? How will it lead to a better strategy that the organization is doing? And too many times leadership loves telling the company what to do. We're doing this. We're organizing this way. A lot of what. What are we doing? And what's often missing is the why. And I always go back to Roger Dupree, who is my hero in the area of internal communication, and he always talks about the key for motivating people is tying everything back to the market. So to help each employee understand, if I were the CEO of this company, I would be making a similar decision. Whether I like it or not, I at least understand the rationale and the why behind it. And it's hard to convey that to employees without really equipping managers well to have those kinds of conversations. So that's absolutely important.
Makes sense. I don't know who that guy is, by the way, but since he's your hero, I want to learn more about him, but I'll do that offline.
All right.
I want to talk a little bit about sort of measurement and rewards recognition. We have one of our customers at SocialChorus, and they've rolled out our app to their global employees. It's a consumer brand, and they've actually given team leaders at the country and then I think division level, I'm not sure exactly, sort of adoption goals and sort of user targets in terms of how many employees will be engaged using our communications platform. And just wanted to get a reaction to that idea and or other ideas that you've seen in action, sort of again reality, not theory, but reality of how would we measure managers around their communications effectiveness, and then how might we reward them?
Well, a tool like you just described is ideal, right? Because then it's not a question of impression or self-reporting. It's something actually measurable. So I think that's what you need to do, is to be able to use tools like that to measure, or to have ways of doing some self-reporting. We've done things with clients where they are trying to roll something out and they ask all managers to communicate something, and then managers have to log into a website and say that they did it, when they did it, and perhaps what were the top questions or what were the top things the group committed to. And then you have an interesting database of information that can be shared. and getting, using a survey tool such as a lot of people utilize to get
SurveyMonkey or whoever. Yeah, sure. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense. No, that's a good segue. Kelly's asked a question here. How to encourage managers to communicate properly and make it a priority. So I think we're sort of really covering that in part now, which is, you could build it into their MBOs. You can survey to see if they've actually done it and or it's been effective. One thing I'll say, Kelly, as a part answer to your question, for SocialChorus customers, many of them run what we call communications effectiveness surveys inside of our app. So they're actually running sort of a 2 or 3 question, like a mini poll type survey in the app, asking employees, do you feel like you're getting more information in a more timely basis. The other thing we can do, by the way, in our platform, I think this is the power of technology or software, is just we can measure communications effectiveness. We can measure engagement and consumption of content by employee group. Which means we effectively can measure, how well that manager is doing, using our app, of course. But we are able to sort of, cut the dashboard along the line of, at the group level. So a retailer, for example, could see what employees at what stores are using the app. Versus others, and we would agree, obviously, with Cheryl that in that setting, for example, like a retail setting, the store manager adopting and promoting any technology solution or communication solution. It could be digital signage. It could be anything, right? That's key, right? The manager incorporating whatever platform or tool or technology into his or her kind of management regimen, right? It's what employees. That's the lead that employees need to see. Another question here, Cheryl. Actually, I'm going to save this one till later. It's a good one from Maura, but I'm going to save that one for later. Let's keep going. Let's talk about results and what we can expect. And maybe I know we're going to move into some case studies, but give us the overview here, Cheryl.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you do this well, there's just a plethora of benefits that accrue to the company. So you have really a strong group of leaders and managers who can drive change within the organization, that are committed and aligned. So we see in so many organizations lots of silos developing, and each group, doing things their own way. By doing this well across the board, this provides kind of a common thread throughout the organization. It allows more opportunities for dialogue. It allows managers to feel more comfortable opening up the kimono, so to speak, and having discussion on topics, which ultimately leads to employees aligned with the organization, with what the company is trying to do, with really buying into what you're trying to do, and ultimately leading to engagement and commitment, which is how we started our discussion today. How key that is for organizational success. Sure.
No, Cheryl, I had a question here for you around how to get started versus how to sort of get to full deployment. So when you think about when you think about getting these kinds of results, what do you normally recommend to clients? Do you recommend they start with let's assume it's a company with 10,000 employees. Would you recommend they start with 1,000 employees and maybe that's 20 managers, just using some rough numbers here, and that sort of start there and prove this out, right? And then roll out, or maybe another way to ask the question is, how many managers would you need to run a phase 1 of a program with to say, okay, this is working, we're getting these kinds of results, and now we should roll it out? Like, how do you guys think about that at ROI?
Well, in terms of the numbers of people.
Yeah, or just the scale of the scale.
Size of the company, but yeah, I mean, I think you'd want at least 20 to 25 to maybe pilot something. But I think first you have to decide where we're going to start.
Right.
What is most broken here is that we have managers who are experienced and trained, but we haven't been giving them tools, or we've been giving them tools, but we haven't taught them how to use them correctly. So I think it's really, you have to first come up with a theory for what's most broken, what's the root cause of our issue, and addressing that.
So do that back to what one of your first tests was. Do the diagnostic first.
Do the diagnostic first, because sometimes there's a tendency for us to say, well, what do I control? Let me fix what I control. And what I control may not be what's really broken. And I may need to use influence and get the CEO's attention and others to get buy-in, which isn't fun and easy, but may be what's most critical to drive the change.
Okay. So listen, let's run it. Let's jump into some case studies here and best practices. I think actually the first one is a SocialChorus case study, and then I know there's several from ROI. So let's do this in the remaining 10 minutes, and then we'll take some more questions as we go. So I think this is a SocialChorus customer, global manufacturing company, and I think that what's really germane here, I think, to our conversation is that at the manager level, they're able to essentially manage their own content channel, and that channel can include different types of information. So in the context of the SocialChorus app, we provide an ability to distribute images, video, PDFs, sort of blog posts and articles. So really kind of any type of content can be delivered to a group of employees. And in this case, it really the content spans everything from training videos, safety information. In fact, this particular customer is one of their use cases is sort of the Monday morning safety checklist is delivered via our app, and it's also handled through that kind of Monday morning stand-up meeting or team meeting where their team gets together. But now we're also able to include that in the app and deliver it to employees. So we have customers that have deployed to the manufacturing floor, to the factory, and we've got customers like Ford and UTC and Boeing, large organizations that are pushing this not just in head office, but pushing this right down to people that work in manufacturing. Cheryl, could you walk us through some of your case studies here?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about is training, and this is a large telecommunications company that we work with to develop a training program for all of their managers. And it goes through really understanding the importance of engagement for employees, what the manager's role is in driving it, understanding your management style and your communication style as an individual, and how do you leverage it and adapt it to best connect with your team, and just really understanding all the communication vehicles available for managers to leverage and how and when to use each to maximize effectiveness. And we saw manager communication really improve dramatically, and managers feeling just much more comfortable about communicating. Another example is with a health system, and I love this one because they have a standard information template that they use called Know, Do, Share, where Know provides detailed context about the information. So there's a way to explain why we're doing something, not just what we're doing. And then it tells managers exactly what they need to do to convey the information. And then there's a share portion, which are the key messages. So it's something that not only managers know how to use, but if I'm leading an initiative in the company or I'm trying to get information out, I have a very easy format to use to convey my information. So it's just easier for everyone to do, and it's very repetitive in a good way in terms of process, but not in terms of content.
Right, and then a good mix of distribution, I guess, right, in terms of the WebEx, the in-person, probably some form of email and printed communication even. But it feels like this case study is all about using different ways to get to the manager and then the employees, right? Particularly if you think about health, really changing, right? Really highly dynamic environment right now, especially right in our country.
Absolutely.
So a real thirst for information to be able to answer questions.
Yeah, in fact, you'll see that in all of our examples here that they're all multi-channel, written, audio, video, two-way. That's just a really important way to access people who have different learning styles, who like to take in information differently, and also to make sure you're getting to them in different ways. So in this large cloud computing company, they have written communication, a manager's call, and chat group. So managers can log in and share ideas and get ideas from others. And that also helps to create this community of leaders and managers within the organization. This next one, multinational energy company, also, as you'll see, multi-channel with a focus on two-way communication. What I love about this one is that they implement manager conversation kits. So it's not about one-way communication, but it's really how do you help managers facilitate conversations and discussions around important company information by providing them with questions, videos, really, good fodder to discuss. I don't have a slide here, but one thing I want to mention quickly, because I know this has come up in some of the questions, is about accountability. And one company that we work with, they do a strategy rollout every fall, and managers talk through a deck with their team, and then everyone has to answer a quiz to see what they understand. And this measured more if the presentation was done or not versus true understanding, but it really was a way to hold managers accountable in kind of a fun way as well to providing information.
A quick question came in here, Cheryl, from Karen around English or our clients translate English only, sort of, or your larger clients, presumably your multinationals, are they translating maybe these kits and these resource materials into local language?
Yes, quite often it's done in many different languages, and most organizations will push it to a region and have it translated locally, but sometimes it's done at corporate and it's sent out in multiple versions. But yeah, you have to understand your population and make sure they get the information the way they can use it.
And listen, I can't resist the temptation. I apologize to mention that SocialChorus is as a employee app. We are in 20 languages now, and I'd also say that in our publishing back end, where our clients use that part of the software to get their content to employees, we now actually interface to Google Translate. I know it's not perfect, but we have clients telling us that they get a lot of the kind of work taken care of in terms of translation by Google Translate, and then of course they may have to clean it up. But we're now able to pass all company content before it's published through Google Translate in the back end of our software, and then deliver it into the employee feed. So that's pretty cool. So that's I know it's a small number of case studies compared to all that you have, Cheryl, but thanks for sharing those. I want to begin to wrap up here and take a few more questions and sort of tie this back, right? So, why is SocialChorus and ROI partnering, and sort of why are we both on the phone together? One of the things that Cheryl talked about and ROI talks about is this 5-step process to enable managers to be effective in really driving change, communication change and effectiveness. And of course, one step is what tools and technologies you might provide to those managers to make that possible. Obviously, SocialChorus is one of those options, not the only, but we think one of the best ones. We have a platform that on the back end allows communicators to create and publish content, and then publish it to either a web app or mobile apps, iOS and Android, of course, and then, of course, email digests and email notifications and mobile notifications. That's sort of a quick sense of what we do. What that really means is the employee gets in their pocket a single interface, a single app that gives them access to what they need to know every day about the company, about their team, and about themselves even, meaning personal information that they want access to that they probably don't have access to, or it's just so hard to get access, right? Which might be because they don't have access to the firewall, or they're outside of the headquarters, or they're on the road, or for whatever reason. So we really feel we're excited, frankly, about the fact that now everybody is essentially carrying a computer in their pocket, and that historically IT, in our opinion, has really abandoned or not really served the deskless worker, and that intranets and large-scale enterprise social networks are really for desk-first employees, for people sitting at a desk, and yet the vast majority of the workforce and those that actually deal with customers, what I call customer-first employees, they don't sit at a desk, and they really have been, in my opinion, been discriminated against in terms of not been provided great technology solutions by the company. And I think now that can change, right? I think every employee deserves an experience like this, and one of the reasons we are so happy to partner with ROI is that, first of all, ROI, from our perspective, is probably the fastest growing agency and strategic consultancy focused on employee communications, internal communications, and with the deepest set of experience and knowledge. And we work with a lot of agencies. And so we're really happy to be working with them. They do phenomenal research around what's working, what's not, and then help customers deploy solutions that are in part technology-based and in part not, right? As I think Cheryl's talked a lot about, right? A lot of this is kind of basic blocking and tackling at the manager level. It doesn't need to be technology-enabled, but I think obviously it can be enhanced by technology. And I don't want to talk too much more about ROI because I'm not the expert, but Cheryl, maybe you could highlight a couple other areas where you guys really focus and specialize for us.
Yeah, sure. I just want to say one thing before I talk about this, that what I really am excited about your app, Greg, is that technology, for the most part, has done a disservice to manager communication over the years. It really, in many ways, usurped the responsibility that historically managers, there would be a cascade and managers knew what they were to do. And with technology, I think a lot of companies thought we can disintermediate the manager and go directly to the employee. And so that core capability has really fallen apart. And what you're trying to do is really saying, okay, let's rebuild that using technology rather than replacing it. So I'm really excited about that. So a little bit about ROI. We are everywhere and work with many different companies, and our whole focus is to help companies bring their best to the world through the power of communication. And we focus in the areas of employee engagement, transformation, leader and manager communication, HR and total rewards, visual storytelling, communication technology, and communication measurement. So those are our key areas. And we've been fortunate over the years to work with over 150 of the largest companies, and here is just a few of our clients on this slide.
I mean, I think one of the reasons we have partnered up and enjoy working together is that we both share this focus on large enterprise, and where these communication challenges, frankly, are probably the most acute, right? Where the workforces are more distributed and increasingly more distributed. So obviously, for those still listening, and we're going to wrap up soon because I promised around 40 to 45 minutes, use the Ready Talk chat box, and I've got a couple more coming in now, questions that I'm going to get to, actually several. In terms of, before I get there, just to remind you, if you want a copy of the ROI Communication Benchmark report, here's the link and the way to reach ROI. And for us as well, and we have a cool report called Technology Gap in Communication. So some good resources for those of you who are on the phone or on the call. So a question here from Judy around, do we have data on pre- and post-launch on the effectiveness of a comms plan on safety issues? And I'll answer first, and then Cheryl jump in. Judy, we don't have that data. We have customers who are using our app for that use case, but we don't have that data. But it's a great question. I don't know, Cheryl, if you have any data or any idea of where someone could find that data.
Nothing comes to mind immediately, Judy, but I can check into it if you want to get in touch with me. I'm happy to see what we might have on that.
Great. And then a question from Maura on hearing about where comms ends and employee learning picks up. Are we trying to grow their careers or help them understand what and how they need to communicate to address timely business challenges? So, yeah, what's your sense there? My sense is it's both, right? Meaning we want them to be better, and in doing so, we're enhancing their manager skills. Cheryl, how do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can motivate them to think that by communicating well enhances their careers, that's a big win-win and maybe provides a little motivation. And in terms of where a learning and development organization versus a communication organization, I think this is one of the areas where a partnership is called for, where if your HR organization have competencies for managers, how does communication figure into that? If the company does an all-employee survey, what kind of questions are there around communication of managers? So I think there needs to be a partnership and a joint commitment to growing this capability within the organization.
A good question here from Suresh, hopefully I pronounced that right, on any thoughts on peer-to-peer communication cultures? Cheryl, how do you think sort of your philosophy and methodology applies in a more, I guess, it would sound decentralized or peer-to-peer environment?
So I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at there, Suresh. Is it an organization where it's less manager-centric? I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I really am not quite sure what the question is.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see if they come back with refinement of that question. My reaction to that is maybe it's relevant to the question or not, which is that our point of view in this is our technology needs to enable from company to employee, from team leader to employee, and from employee to employee. So our point of view is that it cannot just be top down, right? That it's got to be top down from sort of headquarters, from team, and then amongst manager and team. So we just think about the challenge as one that needs to enable sort of different circles, I guess, of communication or different circles of trust.
Right, and I think cross-functional communication and people being able to work across the organization is absolutely key to a successful organization. So even having maybe managers help be an impetus for making sure the right conversations are happening if they're not happening on their own, this can be really helpful.
So there's some questions we're not going to get to, but there's one I want to pick out to end with, Cheryl, and that is, what's the one piece of advice or one thing you would suggest that a manager do to improve communications?
I would say talk to his or her team and find out what people want, what they're not getting, and how it can be more effective. And if their team is not forthcoming, maybe getting someone else who can be trusted to ask that question and get that information.
So basically try to get an accurate, honest diagnosis of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Before taking the next step. Okay. Yep. Great advice. For those questions we can't answer, we'll reach out to you one-on-one. Thank you all for joining us. Pretty much everybody hung in the full almost hour now, so we appreciate it. Stay tuned. We will email you a link to the recording and to the assets, presentations, and research that we discussed today, and also an update about our next webinar. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody.
And thanks again, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect.